Hey guys, let's get started. All right, let's get into the course on Brightspace. Go to content. All right, table of contents. All right, so we have finished some of the network intro on packets and SCAPI, and also we did DNS configuration of some of the services that an important service DNS. And as I think I said in the Linux, in your Linux sysadmin book, if you are following that, it's like the biggest chapter. All right, so we covered that. We covered account management last Thursday, so that was a short one. Hopefully that made sense. It's pretty straightforward. I went over about 50% of those, and then the rest you can submit the homework as homework. Don't forget the Wireshark reading. All right, so these, I believe I've set deadlines for these. So we discussed that as well. All right, so today we are starting a new topic this week. Should be an interesting one. Pretty important also concept, which is firewalls. Okay, so most of this topic it has to do with control, defense. Obviously, firewalls do still have to do with networking. We're looking at packets now and trying to drop the packets, right? So that's basically the idea. So I'll go over that topic. That'll be the topic for this week. There will be a lab assignment, of course, which I've already posted on here, this Word document, most likely. All right, I have a few slides and a few concepts that we're going to be discussing related to firewalls in general. So I'll just talk about them in general, and then we're going to get into the specifics of Linux. And in Linux, the firewall is called IP tables. Okay, the underlying firewall. But we will go, we will use basically the GUI, not the GUI interface, but the sort of the interface to it called the UFW firewall. UFW stands for uncomplicated firewall. So that probably implies that IP tables is complicated, right? So yeah, so we'll go over IP tables. We won't directly look at it as it requires quite a bit to get into. I do have a set of documents for running IP tables on a Raspberry Pi if you want to create a router, your own router with a Raspberry Pi. You can with two network interfaces and then, implement all the firewall rules. All right, so at the end of the semester, you do have a project. We have two projects, actually. One that I assigned that's fixed for everyone and one that's open-ended. So if you kind of want to do that, that's something. I have all the documentation and I can give that to you. We might have some raspberries lying around somewhere, so that's a possibility. But as I said, just think about it. We are on week 8 of the semester, so it's a good idea to start thinking about the term project. So the term project will be, I'll provide some notes for this, but so just open-ended on Linux configuration. So it could be easy, like configuring an email service that we didn't configure in class. There's many of those, right? That's entirely fine. You could do this that I was suggesting, or think of something else that you want to do. As long as it's Linux and configuration. The project, there's two projects, and they're both worth like 5% of your grades, so they're not supposed to be big projects. Just basically practice more on Linux. And one is fix. I will pick a service that I want you to configure. I haven't decided yet. And then one is open-ended. Any questions on any of that? Okay. It's just configuration, basically. All right, so as I said, I have some, I'll go over the documents as I usually do first, kind of illustrate where everything is. And then after that, we will start getting into the specifics. So I'll go over this PDF first. So this PDF, I'm not going to assign this as a lab, actually. It's mostly because it's got some interesting reading materials that I'm going to point out right now. In particular, it's got IP tables, okay? So as I said, IP tables is the Linux firewall, is very powerful. So I'll talk a little bit about it today. I'll use this as reference of how it works, some of the ideas. obviously when you're talking about IP tables, it's meant to be used in a router configuration or in a host configuration. Okay, so in a router configuration, it basically means packets are going through that device from point A to point B. In a local host configuration, packets are going to the specific machine, right? So you have to think about that when you're using IP tables. So that's kind of what I'm going to point out, how that works. So basically, yeah, some of this is, this is not like I said, this PDF you don't have to do as a lab. I want to stress that. It's got some things like writing your own firewall in C, C++, so we're not going to cover that. But it's got a really nice section on IP tables, so I wanted to provide that document for you guys to read through. And it'll supplement what I'm going to say in class today. Okay, so it should be coming up. Yeah, so there it is, background on IP tables. So you can see basically this whole section here starts getting into IP tables on Linux. Using IP tables, you can see it's got, I'll talk about this today, these tables, right, and how they work, the idea basically behind them, some of the commands and how that works, okay? And then basically, yeah, so some exercises. So I'll discuss this a little bit. However, I wanted to mention this because I will be using UFW, and what I want to stress is that UFW is interacting with IP tables, but it's like it converts commands that you type in UFW into IP tables in the background. Okay, does that make sense? So that's mainly for a week. That's kind of what we have time for. Getting into IP tables and doing, would take quite a bit of time. But I do want to point it out, and like I said, if you're interested in something like this, you can do it as a mini project at the end of the semester. All right, so that's one of the documents that I wanted to point out. Okay, so we covered this one. Click on IP tables. This is kind of my notes. I'll be covering this today. I'll go over this some of these ideas. And it's basically just additional examples of how it works. Okay, so I'll go over some of that structure. We do have some scripts, so you can see the link here. We'll be doing some scripts related to a little bit more networking attacks, or not attacks, but just traffic, generating packets. And then, as you will see, your lab assignment for this week will be to write some scripts to interact with the firewall, but also configure some, rules on the UFW firewall, basically, of Linux. So we've used it at this point a little bit. Whenever we've done a lab, I think I've said like UFW enable, UFW disable, right? So we've gone as far as that. Probably for this lab, I would recommend once again that you have 2 VMs, from one to the other, so that you can do things like SSH from one to the other, and then maybe try to block something like that. How does that work? Okay, so we'll think about those ideas. So I do have these slides. I will start with these slides today. Just kind of talk about what is a firewall, kind of give the broader overview of all the types of firewalls. Obviously, there's Cisco firewalls, networking firewalls, but this class is about Linux, so I will focus on the Linux firewall. Okay. And then finally, this is the Word document. Obviously, this will be your lab assignment for this week. So if you want to start reading through it, I will demo some of this, starting today and then on Thursday as well. Okay. This should be a 1-week topic, right? So this assignment will be due a week from Thursday. As you can see, some of the ideas basically, well, UFW, it's the host, it's the easier version of the host-based firewall for Linux. So we'll go over some of the commands. How does it work? Some of the structure, services, basically, port numbers is what we're going to focus on. We're also going to look at how Linux can disable things like ping, etc. These commands that you see here are more like IP table commands, not UFW commands. So I want to cover that a little bit. Then, rules, with firewalls, blocking by an IP address, etc. So we'll cover that. Netcat, I'll introduce the extremely versatile Netcat utility. So this is more like something that allows you to create tunnels from one machine to the other, similar to SSH, but unencrypted, obviously. So we'll take a look at that. And basically, we'll use it as an instrument to block off traffic. Okay. And then there will be some scripting examples, as I said. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the idea. We're going to go over that. So I'll start with the slides, just kind of briefly cover some of the concepts of Linux, or firewalls, I should say. Sorry, let me download this. All right, so you guys can see this, right? I don't want to do the thing because then it breaks my... All right, so this is system administration and security, right? So we're looking at a specific tool this time around for defense of your operating system. So the idea is, you have to be kind of paranoid about your, your systems, right? Your operating system. All right, so there's a lot of things that you can worry about when it comes to security of your system. So some of them, you guys take courses on this, right? Like disaster recovery, right? So there's natural things, etc. But in particular, in this example, we're just going to look at firewalls and what they are exactly. All right, so I have some pictures here of things that can happen. Okay. All right, so we'll start with a security policy, just kind of, what it is. Okay, so what is the security policy? So it's usually a document, really not that technical. All right, it doesn't have to be technical, where certain things are defined, like usage of, accounts, who can log into what, those kinds of things, right? What services should be available and who can access them, basically. So it's a document, usually. The process starts with, something like a risk assessment, right? Just defining what it is that you're trying to protect, right? So basically you define assets, vulnerabilities, and then the controls that you want to have in place to protect your system. Okay, so you can see that. So you have many assets, and then you define what the threats are for them, and then the controls or defenses that you want to have in place. So in this case, there's a lot of types of security policies. You can see those here. User level policies, what users must sign in before receiving services. Business level policies, network connectivity, log retention. These are defined first, and a lot of these eventually will make their way into the implementation of rules on the firewall, if that makes sense. But it all comes from here. Okay. Device hardening, OS hardening, etc., turning off services, and so on. And many, many other kinds of policies, basically. Right, so these are just examples of that. All right, so now we're going to get into, you define those policies, right? And we're going to focus now on just one control, which would be the Linux host-based firewall. Sorry. All right. So basically, as I said, in our case, IP tables is the technology in Linux. We're going to use UFW mostly for this week. What are the things that you can do with UFW? You can block IPs, you can block ports, you can block incoming and outgoing traffic. And now, although it seems pretty straightforward, sometimes it can get a little bit confusing. The trick is really you have to imagine yourself as the firewall, right? Put eyes on the firewall and then have packets just go in front of the eyes of this firewall. So you have to really think of that, and also the direction. Is the packet going, going out or coming in, right? So those are key things in order for your rules to work. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to talk about. So we can see here we have an example of a router and a firewall, and a router can also have rules, right? And a firewall will have rules. So basically you have in this scenario, this is more of a network type of a firewall, right? Our firewall on Linux is not like this, right? So that's an important thing to understand. So the difference is, because this is a firewall in the network, it's also a router. So that means it's got two network cards, if you notice. And if it's got two network cards, that means that its only purpose is to receive a packet and let it through, or not let it through, right? And so you have to think about that, because that governs how you set up the rules in the firewall, right? So just remember, for instance, when you're doing something like this, you need to have a set of rules in a special location, which in IP tables is called the forward table, okay? If a packet is going to a final computer, then it's a different table. That's going to be the input table, okay? So that's an important notion, okay? So here we have a router and we have a firewall, and basically the difference in general is that this has probably is less restrictive, right, than this one. So the firewall usually does not allow anything that initiated from the outside in, right? So that's an important thing, but things from the inside out are allowed. Whereas the router can allow things from the outside, or from the outside in or inside out. Okay, so basically at the end of the day, both of these devices are very similar, a router or a firewall, except that this one is more restrictive, okay? And it definitely would, like, if something initiates from the outside, in general, it does not let it in, all right? Unless it's got something like port forwarding, etc., which, by the way, you could also implement on IP tables. So all of that, it's basically a complete firewall. All right, any questions? So, as keep this in mind, we're not talking about something like this. We're talking about just a machine with a firewall itself. All right. So those are some of the characteristics of a firewall design goal. So traffic must, from inside to outside, must pass through the firewall, and then only authorized traffic as defined by the local security policy will be allowed to pass. Okay. Basically, most of what we're going to look at will be service control. So looking at services and port numbers, IP addresses, etc. We're not going to look at things like behavior control or anything like that. So the UFW is a very simple firewall, but I'll go over some of the details. At the end of the day, what they are is basically a packet filtering device. Okay, that's basically what it is. So you're going to it's basically a set of, it's like Scapy, right? So it's like, if you remember, like Scapy, we're sniffing packets, we grab the packets, we break it up into all the headers, we look at the headers, and then the firewall needs to have a way of saying, okay, I'm going to drop this packet or allow it through, right? That's basically it. So applies rules to each incoming and outgoing IP packet, typically a list of rules based on matches in the IP or TCP header, right? And it forwards or discards the packet based on rules matched. That's it. So that's literally how it works. Source IP, destination IP, source and destination ports, IP protocol field, etc. All right. So, and those are the examples that we're going to look at in the class. Okay. So the rest of this, you can see here, this is basically the one that we're doing, host-based firewalls used to secure an individual host. So in this case, you're going to have a Linux machine and you're going to try to secure it. Okay. All right, so let's take a look. The rest of this is for networking. All right, so let's get to the lab basically and start thinking about this. All right, so I'm going to do some Linux commands. right, so I'm going to start up the virtual machine. It is really hot in here. I'm sweating. All right, so while it's loading, let's take a look at the document. So get the firewall software. All right, so sudo apt-get install gufw. The UFW firewall should be available. This is what we will be using. You can see here if you want to enable the UFW firewall, you can do sudo UFW enable. It should be on. And if we want to turn it off, you do UFW disable. All right, so those are the main commands. So the first scenario that we're going to look at is how to craft ACLs with UFW for allowing and blocking off SSH. Okay, so that's really the trick. And this will start to guide how we're going to think about the firewall. So basically this problem would be starting and stopping an SSH connection. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's think of the scenario. We're going to start SSH. We're going to turn on the firewall, and we're going to see if we can still connect to SSH, right? We need to look on that machine if that port is open. That's really the key. Okay. And we're going to try to block it. Here's the command that we can try, UFW deny. All right, so we're going to define our two machines here. All right, so I have feed. All right, so I'm going to define one machine that's going to start the SSH service, and I'm going to define the other machine where I want to block SSH, basically. Here we are. All right, so I'm going to open up the terminal. Okay, so let's do ifconfig here. Oops. Okay, so that should be 2024. All right, so 204 I'm going to define as the UFW client. So I'm going to initiate SSH from here to the other machine, okay? So the other machine then is where I'm going to define the firewall. Let's go to that one. So now let's do ifconfig on this one. Okay, so this is 202.15. So this is going to be the UFW firewall. So this is where we want to add the rules, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is sudo, according to the command, UFW enable. Firewall is active and enabled on system startup. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now and do sudo service, where I'm going to do sudo netstat -na pipe rep TCP. Okay, so I can see that port 22 is probably open there. Okay. So let's go ahead and try. First of all, let's ping from this one. So I'm going to ping from 204 to 10.0.2.15, just to make sure that I can reach it. You can see I can reach it, basically, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and do what? I'm going to try to SSH into that machine. Probably should be able to SSH, right? So SSH 10.0. Remember, I'm going to do ifconfig here, right? Remember, I'm 10.0.24 currently. Now I'm going to SSH into 10.0.215. Give it a minute. It should say rejected or something. Are you guys trying this? Are you having the same issue?
I was able to go.
You were able to get in fine. Okay. Okay. Let me disable mine. UFW disable. Okay, so the firewall is stopped now. I'm going to go ahead and try this again. And you can see I can get in, so the firewall was preventing me from access. Okay, so you can see I'm now in. You can look at this here. You can do the ifconfig. And it's giving me now the IP 10.0.215, which is the IP of that machine that I logged into. Okay. So now I'm going to go back, sudo UFW enable, but I'm going to try to add a rule here. UFW allow 22. Sudo W allow 22. Okay, rule added. All right, so let's take a look now. I'm going to go back. I'm going to log out of here. So I'm going to say exit. Connection is closed. If I do ifconfig 10.0.2.4 back again, right? So now I'm going to try, and you can see ifconfig 10.0.2.15. Does that make sense, guys? You see? So basically, it's just a simple, it's actually very straightforward with the UFW firewall. Just keep in mind, this is updating IP tables, actually. Any questions? Everyone got to do that? Basically, the idea with the exercise is from one machine to the other, you SSH, you show that you can SSH, Then you go to that machine, add a rule in UFW, and then try it again, and you should be blocked, basically, in some way. Got it? Questions? So that's the exercise that you would need to replicate. Yeah, so basically, let's go a little bit over some of the ideas with UFW. The basic command is UFW. I'll go back here. Okay, so the basic command is UFW. Obviously, you're dealing with something that's really important, so sudo may be required, okay? But the basic command is UFW. You will need the root privileges. The goal is basically to block ports, IPs, etc. Basic keywords are going to be deny, allow, and delete, okay? So the basic keywords, UFW, are going to be deny, right? Or allow, right? Or delete. Okay, so these are, simple commands. So for the example that I did UFW allow 22 bits. Okay, that's a port number, and you guys may remember is for the SSH service. If you want to delete a rule, such as allow 22, right, then the syntax should be as follows. You should be able to do UFW delete, and then the actual rules. So in this case, allow 22. Okay, so that should be the approach. Okay. Well, maybe without the double. And you need to have the root privilege. Okay, looks like it took it there. All right, so no double quotes, basically. Any questions? So the idea is you add, this is similar, I think, in principle to in Cisco, where you can do no, and then whatever the rule is from your Cisco classes, right? In 170, etc. You put whatever the rule was and you put a no. This is kind of the same idea. All right, so that's one of the ideas there. If you want to look at the status of the firewall, so let me just do clear here. You can do sudo UFW status, and you can say verbose. All right, so status active, logging on low. Default, you can see there, the default parameters are deny incoming, right? So when the firewall is enabled, it denies any incoming. Outgoing is allowed, and routed is denied, right? So you can see that basically it doesn't let any connection that initiated from the outside in, but it allows anything that initiates on the machine going out. Okay. If you want to see more information about the firewall, there is configuration files, which, as you probably know by now, everything is located in the etc folder. So we can take a look at that. So we can do sudo nano etc UFW, basically. Oh, it's a folder. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a folder. So in here you can see a lot. It's UFW config. So basically then we can go all of these files. You have a UFW configuration file, and then you have rules, before rules, after rules. So this is a little bit more in line with how IP tables works, which basically has got this idea of a packet being processed before it leaves, or being processed before it goes into the main firewall. Okay, but we don't need to look at all of this. Let's just take a look at the UFW config. Okay. Since there's data in it. So see. So there's UFW, right? So this is the directory I'm trying to get into. Here. All right, so I'm trying to look at this file. What are the permissions? Root, read. There's data in it. UFW. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so there it is. So, okay. Now. All right, so, here you can see set to yes to start on boot. If setting this remotely, be sure to add a rule here. Please use the UFW command to set the log level, etc. So but basically you can see you have some initial parameters there. Okay, we have some additional files here, such as, rules, etc., that we will come back to. All right, so we can just take a look at some of it. Let's do sudo, sudo, I guess. Cat user dot rules. Okay, and you can see basically you have more rules in here that you can define. These are starting to look a lot like what IP tables actually is. All right, so obviously we will make changes to just one of these. But I wanted to show you where you have some configuration files. All right, so let's try another exercise, blocking an IP address, basically. So let's see how that would work. So let's exit out of this one. Okay, so I'm gonna go open the terminal. This is ifconfig. Okay. So 10.0.2.5 is where we're running the firewall. So let's say that I wanna block an IP, right? So you can do something like UFW, probably sudo UFW deny, and then you would do from. Okay, and what that means is that remember that packets have direction. So the packet could be going out of the machine. The packet could be coming into the machine. The packet could be going through the machine. And all of that information is very relevant to figure out how to make this decision. So you really have to think about this from. So here I'm going to put in an IP address. I'm going to say 192.168 dot something 1.3. All right, so the idea would be to block basically based on that IP address. So that would be the command for that. Okay. All right, so let's try to implement this rule now, basically. So we're going to go to the other machine. So the IP ifconfig, right, should be what? 10.0.2.15. think I'm logged in. So, yeah, connection closed. So this should be 10.0.2.4, right? So I'm still gonna use SSH. Okay, I'm still gonna use SSH. Let's try that. Let's think of the type of blocking that we're gonna do. So we're gonna do it at the IP level, right? So I'm gonna do SSH into 10.0.2.15. Okay. See, it's the firewall is blocking. So for us to implement this, we may need to do two rules, right, on the firewall. First, we would allow SSH to let the service in, but then we need to block by IP address, which takes us to this idea that firewalls are very sequential. You have one chain, you have one rule and then another rule. And so we need to build this up basically. So here you can see I'm trying to SSH, the firewall is on and I can't connect to it. Does that make sense? So I'm going to try now to block by IP, but I need to let the SSH service get through. It's just an exercise. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm going to try sudo UFW, here, UFW, status verbose. Okay, you can see that there. All right, so I'm going to do sudo, what was it? Allow 22, UFW, allow 22. Okay, so now I should be able to allow it. So I'm going to try SSHing. You can see I can get in, no problem. I should be in. I have config. I am 10.0.2.15, so I'm there. So now what do? I'm going to exit out. Okay. And now let's add a rule to block this IP, even though we have the SSH in there, right? So that's kind of where I'm going. So I'm going to try to block that IP. So that should be sudo UFW deny, and what was it? 10.0 from, right? From 10.0.2.4. Rule added. Do you guys see that? So now the goal is to see if we know that we could get in through SSH. So I close the connection. I'm going to do ifconfig 10.0.2.4. Okay. I can get in. So that's probably because, I may have needed to do the order differently. That's actually what I needed to do. So let's go over here. Do you see what I'm saying? It hit one of the rules first, the SSH, and it let me through without ever hitting the IP one. Do you see that? So now let's invert the order of those rules. So let's go ahead and do sudo delete, and we're going to delete allow 22, right? Allow 22, sudo UFW, sorry. Okay, and I'm also going to delete, what was the other one? Deny from 10.0.2.4. Delete it, right? So now let's change the order of these. Let's go back to the here. Connection is closed. ifconfig 10.0.2.4. So let's just try. I should be able to SSH. Or not be able, because I have both rules. Because the firewall is not allowing anything. That's what it is. All right, so this is not letting me in. So now I'm going to change the order of how I enter those things, right? So initially I entered block SSH, block IP. Now I'm going to enter block IP and then block SSH, all right? The order should matter here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do sudo UFW deny from 10.0.2.4, right? Yes. So I'm going to deny that IP. Okay. And then I'm going to allow UFW allow 22. So when I allow 22, the service has been allowed, correct? Right. So I'm going to try that. And I can't get it. Do you guys see that? So it's hitting the IP one before it's hitting the SSH one. Before I did it wrong because it was hitting the SSH one and it just said, I'm going to allow. So firewalls are kind of like that, okay? That it's like they're chains of filters. And the first one it hits, it goes with that, okay? So you have to, whenever you have these kinds of problems, you'll encounter this issue. Does that make sense? So how do we allow it now in an easy way? Intuitively, what would you say is the thing that we need to do for this to work? Without changing the order, maybe if we just delete that IP one, right? Then the SSH should let it in. Yeah. Okay. So then I'm going to try that. I'm going to go into this one. And I should do sudo UFW delete, which one? Deny, right? Deny from 10.0.2.4, which is the IP address that's being hit. So I deleted that rule. So now I'm going to go back to my system over here and try to, there it is. It works like magic. Now, if I do ifconfig, does this make sense, guys? So one of the key things to remember, like there's a couple of things that will trip you up when you do these kinds of problems. I'll give you like 3 problems additionally on Thursday, but it'll be kind of like this. You know, the things to watch out for in UFW is this, it's the precedent. You have to like keep track of the rules you've entered. Be careful that you don't leave a rule in there because you can get in trouble. Okay. All right, so we covered some of the basic commands. Are there any questions so far with this one? Okay. All right, so let's see if have a few more commands here, and then we'll get back into the lab questions. All right, so we went over the basic command, deny, allow, delete. We did an example of allow SSH. We looked at where some of the files are located, and then we started to look at UFW deny by IP. Okay, so we did that. So obviously, if I did sudo allow 22, you could also do something like sudo deny 22. So that's definitely a command you can try. Let's try sudo UFW status. Okay. So sudo UFW status. And there you go. So that's kind of a nice one to take a look at because it's basically like a listing of commands that you have in there. Do you guys see that? That makes sense. So I have a few commands in there. So I'm gonna just try to remove them. I have 2 allows in there actually. Sudo enable. All right, so let's take a look at, gonna delete one of the rules using this. So sudo UFW delete allow 22, right? Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and sudo UFW status, and we can see basically we don't have any rules in there. Okay. Just making sure that I've covered all the commands. Okay. Yeah, it's like. All right, so let's get back into the document then. So let's go back to the Word document and see where we are. All right, so get the firewall software. What is UFW? So you guys know now it's an interface to IP tables. Enable the firewall. We've done that. We've done this exercise sudo service SSH start. We allowed 22. You know what a port is. You should know these things. You don't, if you want, you can use PuTTY, but if you don't want to, just use SSH. That's fine. For another machine. We see if you have access to the firewall. We block basically. So to close a port, sudo UFW deny 22. SSH with PuTTY. We remove the rule. All right. Now we can also change to permit root log. So root access via SSH can also be changed in the SSH deconfig file, right? So there are other places where you can make changes also related to connections. So let's go into this folder, cd etc ssh. Clear here. So cd etc ssh. SSH. Okay. I don't want to stash L. And you can see here we have several files related to SSH basically. All right, so we can modify SSHD underscore config. There's going to be a parameter in there called permit root login. This is going to say no. So basically there, we could change this to yes, and I guess root could log in basically, right? So root access via SSH can also be changed in this here. So probably not a good idea. That's why they have it set by default as no, but all right, so let's take a look at that. So SSH deconfig here. So I'm going to do sudo nano SSH d. All right. So this is the SSHD server configuration file. You can set several things in here. So it defines ports. Let's see, we're looking for root. Permit, I guess, yeah. Permit root login, prohibit password. Okay. And it's got several settings, challenge response authentication. Probably the root account would need to be enabled actually for this to work. But, so I don't see it as enabled. Did you guys see it? Permit tunnel. Should say permit root login, no. Empty passwords. I guess, yeah, permit root login. This one here. So prohibit password. So basically we'd have to enable it. And I guess if it says yes, we could say no here. Okay. So basically that's what this is saying. But like I said, if you want to try this out, you'll probably also need to enable the login for root, which we saw actually last week. Okay. So these are, I'm going to set this back to the way it was. Okay. And I'm going to comment this one back up. All right. So that's some of the things that you can set here. All right, let's go back to the document. All right, we've looked at sudo UFW verbose. We've looked at the SSH example. Okay. Change SSH config to permit login. Yes. Restart SSH. As I said, if you can try that on your own. So I'll leave that as part of the lab. All right, so let's take a look at the next big one. I will demo this one. So prevent anyone from pinging your machine, right? So you guys can ping the machine. So we're going to do that. And now we are going to look at one of those files, right? In the folder that we looked at a few minutes ago. How we can basically make a modification in the file and basically stop pinging. Does that make sense? So that's basically our idea here. These commands that you see here actually look a lot like IP tables. So this is actually the syntax of IP tables and not UFW. Okay, the underlying. So let's go ahead and do that scenario. I'm going to go here. I'm going to exit out of this. Actually, let's stay here. Let's exit it. I'll open it. All right, so this should be ifconfig 10.02.15. Okay, so that's where my firewall is. So now I'm going to do sudo UFW verbose or status. Sorry, it's active and I have no rules in it. Right, you always want to check this. If there's no rules in there. Now I'm going to go to the other machine and I'm going to run ping. All right, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to exit just in case. Yeah, I was connected. I'm going to do clear. I'm going to do config, ipconfig. ipconfig. ifconfig. All right, I'm 10.0.2.4, so I am going to ping 10.0.2.15. I should be able to ping, right? That it's not being stopped by the firewall current. All right, so I want to prevent this from happening. So we're just going to follow the instructions on how to do this. If we were doing things on IP tables, we would run the command IP tables. Do you see that? This would be the direct IP tables command, but we're not using IP tables directly. We're just using UFW, so we're kind of living in that space of UFW, if that makes sense. but there are files in that UFW folder that look like IP tables. All right, so that's basically the program that we would use. All right, so I'm going to go ahead here and go back to the UFW to the UFW firewall. All right, and we need to navigate somewhere. So it says here, ifconfig, get the IP for the Ubuntu machine, ping it from the physical machine we've done, or the other machine, we've done that. So ping. Now to drop ICMP ping commands, go to etc UFW. So we're going to go there. Oh, okay. I'm going to go to etc UFW and then remind me, please, the before dot rules. Okay. So, and then all we have to do actually, we're going to look for these commands that look like this, and we're going to change this that says accept to drop. Okay, that's it. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So before dot rules. Okay. etc UFW. Clear CD. TC. UFW, right? Okay. All right, so we're there. ls-l. Now we need to look for before dot rules. So as I was saying, this might be a little bit confusing, but firewalls are like a pipe. Imagine them such as a pipe. And then you have like thing, and then a thing, and then a thing. So the packet is going through these sections, right? So before it gets to the packet filter, after it got to the packet filter. So you can do things. So this is important, for instance, when you want to do things like port forwarding and things like that, right? Where something comes into a port, and then what do you do in port forwarding? You change some of the information in the packet to redirect it to somewhere else inside your network. Do you see that? So you have this idea of before and after, basically. And that comes from the IP tables. But in our case, since we are using UFW, all we're doing is making the changes in the directory of UFW. So let's try out. Notice here, we want to go into this file, before.rules. All right, let's take a look at it. It's a file. It is root own, which makes sense. And if we are the sudo, we should be able to write to it. So that's really what matters. So I'm going to go ahead and sudo nano before dot rules, right? Yeah, everyone with me? All right, so now we go in here and it says to look for a section. There's a lot of things, right? There's a lot of things that are going on here. Allow all on loopback, quickly process packets for which we already have a connection, drop invalid packets. All of this is important, okay? Don't touch it, actually. All of this is doing various things. Notice here, I like this part here that says OK ICMP packet codes for input, OK ICMP packet codes for forward. Why is that there? Because you can think in general of IP tables as having three basic tables, okay, or chains: input, output, and forward, okay? Forward only functions when you have two network cards and the IP tables is implemented on something that is acting as a router. What does that mean? You have two network interfaces and you receive it on one and you're going to pass it to the other one. So from one outside network to an inside network, those packets and IP tables go through the forward chain. But are we doing that? No, right? Because we are doing the local host. So that means packets come in on a network interface and are not going to go to another network interface. Instead, they're just going to a process inside that local system. Do you guys see that? That's really important. In that case, the chain that you look at is input. Do you guys see that? Making sense? All right. On Thursday, when we continue this, I will go over IP tables in a little bit more depth with the commands. But like I said, we're not going to be implementing much of that. We can just use UFW. All right, so it should be then, just my thinking is that these are the commands that we need to change, okay? So we can go back to the PDF document just to kind of confirm UFW before input, so -A, UFW before input, -P, ICMP, right? ICMP type, all these types, -J, accept. Okay, so let's take a look back in our environment. So it does say, in fact, UFW before input, right? Notice down here, these say UFW before forward. So they would be for an IP tables running on a network scenario. All right, so basically then, this is just the specific table, right? -P ICMP. What are ICMPs? That's the protocol, right, of ping packets, right? So if you guys remember, you have your Ethernet header, you have an IP header, and then you have what? The ICMP header. So that's a ping. And then you have the type. So in this case, there's many types of ping packets, right? Like echo request, echo reply, destination unreachable, and so on. So you can get, this is where, if you want to do this at this fine grain level, go to IP tables. You know what I mean? You go there and you do that. You sudo apt-get install IP tables and work on that one. But for our purposes, UFW was created for the person that doesn't need to do so much, right? All right, so all these packets would be ICMP echo request, echo reply. They would be values in the ICMP header of your ping packets, okay? So that's an important thing. And then notice -J, this is how basically IP tables decides or gives a command basically to either drop a packet or reject a packet or accept. So in our case, we are accepting, but I believe it said that we should drop, correct? Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and drop. Remember that what we want to do is we want to drop the ping packets. Go ahead here. And let's not forget when we're done to come back and fix this again. I'm going to do drop. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and hit Control X, Y, Enter. And this is how you configure Linux, right? So remember, Linux is very command line, text file oriented. Okay. All right, so we did that. So now let's go back to the PDF or the Word document. It says basically once you've done that, disable and enable the firewall. So UFW disable, enable. And then we're going to ping again when it says things like from the Windows, just the other machine. All right, so now hopefully the ping should not work. So let's go over here. I'm going to do ifconfig. ifconfig. Okay, 10.02.15. I'm going to do sudo UFW disable, and then sudo UFW enable. I can do sudo UFW status just because. All right, it's active. All right, so now we go to the other machine. Let's try the ping. This is ifconfig 10.0.24. I'm gonna ping 10.0.2.15. What do you guys think? Did it work? Or it worked, right? Make sense? So it's using the underlying IP tables rules, but in a different way. Any questions? We had to take that file, load it up basically with the parameters. Pretty easy, right? Pretty straightforward. All right, so but the kind of thing that you kind of have to like look at it a little bit before you make sense. All right, so we want to revert this back. So we can't ping that machine. Some machines, some systems like to disable ping, right? They don't want to be. So let's go ahead, stop this one. I'm going to go back to the other machine. Now we're going to proceed to repeat this sudo nano before rules. Okay. Now, you can see it's got DHCP information, various things. Okay. All right. So it should be this one, right? That we did to drop a UFW before input. So go ahead and just change that back to accept. And in a very simple way, you have now learned how IP tables works. At least briefly, you have looked at some of the command syntax of IP tables, because this is definitely how IP tables work. Right, it's just a little bit more complex. Accept. And there we go. So now we have both of these enabled once again. So we need to reset it. All right, so I'm just going to run the command sudo UFW enable, no, disable, sudo UFW enable. Okay. We go back to the machine. When you do your lab for any problem I give you, please just do this, run it. And here it is without the rule, it works. Then here's the rule. Then now with the rule, in place, now it doesn't work, right? Just do that, document it really well, because with these labs, it's a little bit hard to visualize. All right, so let's go ahead and try it. And you can see that ping is once again working, basically. Any questions? Pretty straightforward, right? All right, so we've seen, I think we've completed that part of the exercise. Okay, so we've done, basically, blocking ping requests, basically. All right. Let's take a look. Firewall block an IP address. So I think this one we did. Get IP from a machine. Add a rule. Yeah, UFW deny from IP. Yeah, do you have it? Yeah, right. And then you can also do UFW allow from IP. Okay. So that one we did. Right, then we have netcat. Okay, the netcat, I will leave this netcat for Thursday, but it's like a way of creating tunnels, and you will see what that is. Basically, you have one port number and another port number, right? And so let's say, for instance, that I wanted to back up a set of files from one system to another. I can create a port in one machine, port 5000, let's say, and then I can write a command that I can grab the files, redirect them into that port, and they're going to go to another machine at their port and just go through, right? So that's what netcat is. It's all unencrypted. However, later in the semester, we will look how we can make encrypted. These are called tunnels. If you've ever heard of that, there's no actual tunnel, obviously. It's just wrapping headers around the packets, basically, of how they're going to go. But we'll cover this one on Thursday. So instead, today, we're just going to get started with a little bit of the scripting. Just take a look at how that would work. Okay. And then we'll do the other thing next time. Let me just grab this. Oh, here it is. All right, so it should be pretty straightforward, hopefully. Not too bad. we're gonna basically, today, we're just gonna try to send a rule to the UFW via a Python script. Okay, let's say that you wanted to do the configuration and you have it in your system. So we were using this one. So I'm going to do clear here. I'm going to exit. I'm going to open up the terminal. IF config just to make sure. All right, so I'm using 10.0.2.15 as the firewall. I'm going to do sudo UFW status. Okay, it's active. Now I'm going to navigate. I'm going to go to desktop here. Yeah, I have, so this is the other machine, I guess. All right, I'm going to do mkdir ITS 372 2024, right? So now I'm going to cd into it. All right, so let's write a script basically and try to insert that into the firewall. So as you can see, it hopefully should not be that difficult. I'm going to do nano configure firewall. Okay, so I'm going to configure the firewall.py. I'm going to use the OS. So let's try this approach. Import OS. Basically, I'm going to define a function here. Configure firewall. Configure firewall. Okay, colon. Then I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. And basically here, I'm going to do os.system. And I'm going to say UFW. What is it? Deny from which one should we do? Let's do allow from, yeah, let's do this. Just as an example, right? Then we're going to modify it. UFW allow from 10.0.2.4, okay? All right, so we're going to run that command. Then we're going to say os.system. And I'm going to do UFW disable. And then I'm going to say os.system. UFW enable. Got it? So that's the basic idea, just one simple example. So let's invoke this function. So I'm going to say configure firewall like that. All right. So let's try it. Let's do sudo UFW status. There's no rules in there. I'm going to try to SSH from here, from 10.0.4, 10.0.2.4. So SSH 10.0.2.15, okay? So this should work. Or it doesn't work because the firewall is not allowing. Well, I'm trying to think of a simple scenario here. What did I say? Allow? Actually, that works. Let me look at the script. Oh, I did say allow, right? All right, good. So this works then. Okay, so currently I can't log in. Right? SSH, I can't log in. Right? So I can't log in. Now I'm going to go ahead and run the script from the other one. So I'm going to say probably we need sudo here, right? Python 3. Okay, so I did that. And then you do sudo UFW status. The rule has been added. All right, so now we can go to the other machine. And I'm able to get in. Do you guys see that? At least I got as far as this. Okay. ifconfig. And we were able to insert the rule basically through Python script. This is pretty straightforward at this point. There's no complication. If anything, this is where you would want to make it a little bit more complex, right? So let's define the IP then from the outside. So I'm going to go back to the Python script. Nano, yep. All right, so here, but instead of providing the IP here, what if you're supposed to write a script, maybe that's gonna, vary, right? And the commands are gonna vary. So then you could do something like plus, and then you can add the IP address here, okay? And probably the command that I'll give you will be something like deny this IP by this port number and so on, or this sequence. I may say deny these two IP addresses on these specific port numbers. So you'll have to correct. But this should be, as far as scripting goes, should be very straightforward. All right, this is just a super easy way of doing this. You should probably use the argv, argc, or args command to get these parameters. But in this case, I'm just going to do something like this. So enter IP address. Okay. So, oops, sorry. So then you can do IP equal input. All right, so now we can read the IP address from the, as the script is running and hopefully populate it in here. So let's go ahead and try that out. All right, so I'm going to do sudo UFW status. I want to remove this. So sudo UFW delete. And what do we delete? Allow. This set allow from, right? 10.0.2.4. Okay. No rule in there. Okay. So we go back to the other system. Exit out of here. Yeah. Connection closed. So ifconfig. Oops, sorry. Okay, we're back at 10.0.2.4. I'm going to try to SSH again, 10.0.2.15. Doesn't work. I need to enable that on the machine. So then I'm going to go to that other script. And now I'm going to run it. Sudo Python 3 configure firewall. It says to enter the address. So 10.0.2. Pretty straightforward, right? And then rule added. Okay, good. Firewall stopped. And there you go. So the problem that you can expect will be something that might have several rules and the order will matter, okay? So I'll think that might be the hardest problem. So you'll need to insert several rules in the correct order for it to work. That's really the thing that you need to visualize a little bit better. All right, so let's go back to, so as I said, wait until Thursday or Friday to see the problems. Let's go back to the Word document. So you can see here, I think we've done this example, I believe. Write a Python script that, that can add two rules to the UFW firewall to block a specific address and port. All right, so that is the problem. Okay. The IP address and the port should be given via the command line. Okay, that's also. And then, of course, don't forget to remove all these rules, disable firewall, etc. when you're done with this lab, as if you leave those in there, they're going to be a problem. All right, so let's think about this, actually. We have a few minutes left. So this is a nice problem, right? So it says, so this is more like the demo, and then I'll give you 3 problems for you to solve. But let's think, write a Python script that can add 2 rules to the UFW firewall to block a specific IP address and a port number. Okay, so there's a couple of ways of interpreting this. Okay, so let's go. Let's actually remove those. So UFW, let's remove this one. So UFW delete allow from, it's gone. Status, it's gone, right? So the firewall is clear. Now let's go into the nano. So what you could do is, I could do, it says IP and port. OS system UFW, and it says deny, right? So deny port. Do you see that? And then this one we need to change to deny from. Deny from. Like that. All right, so that's a way of inserting 2 rules here. We're going to need then to have a port number as well. Print, enter port number. IP equal, oh, sorry, port equal input. Okay. All right, it's a very simple way of doing this. So let's try. Control X, Y, clear. UFW status. So now let's run the script. Yep. IP address 10.0.2.4. Port 22. Okay. Okay. What do you expect to see when I run the status, UFW status on here? What do you think you guys will see? Two rules, right? Okay, so you have the 10.0.2.4 or 422. It'll hit one of those and it'll end there, right? Remember, if it hits this one, it will not continue to this one, okay? Keep that in mind because I may give you some problems, just about 3 problems, but obviously that will be my goal to make it a little bit like that. Any questions, guys, so far? Pretty straightforward, right? This is very easy and really is all about learning how to implement these rules. There's not much with the UFW firewall in Linux. Okay, so I'll kind of recap. So we went over this document today, which is basically your homework assignment. I did the demos basically of ports and IP, a lot, some of the basic commands in UFW. We did the ping example. We haven't done the netcat part. I will do that on Thursday. And I did a simple example with Python. I'll do a few more Python examples on Thursday, and I will assign some more problems basically. And also I will do the discussion of IP tables itself, which you can start reading yourself if you would like. It is probably this, no. Oh, that is, yeah, it is that document. All right, I'll stay for a few minutes. If you have any questions, I graded one of your homework assignments. You can take a look at that. And then I'll see you guys on Thursday. If you have questions, I'm seeing. All right. Have a good rest of your day and enjoy the good, nice weather.
Hey, I sent you an email about the services homework.
Mhm.
I put it on there and I closed my laptop, so I don't see it. So I don't know if you see it. Would I be able to get like?
Yeah. You sent me an email, you said, because I don't remember.
I can check.
I don't have any, like in my inbox. And if I get, huh?
It was a while ago. I think it was the day before or the day after it was due. Because I opened my laptop and it sent it.
Yeah, send it to me. I mean, I honestly don't have anything, so. Yeah.
So I heard it was supposed to mail. So we're gonna actually pull it in there.
You like the school emails? I don't know if it's me, like sometimes they'll send like. Yeah, like having you. Like, they go straight to on contracts or something. Yeah.
I don't know. I usually store student emails somewhere and I don't remember having any action.
Have a good one.
Yep, see you on Thursday.